Hello everyone, and welcome to my YouTube channel. I am Anime Octopus, and today we're diving into a brand new fanfiction scenario that explores an exciting crossover idea. What if Naruko became Rias' new devil? In this story, we'll explore an alternate path where Naruko's fate takes a completely unexpected turn, leading her into the world of devils, power, and supernatural politics under Rias' command. How would her abilities evolve? How would she adapt to the devil world? And what kind of chaos or greatness would follow? Before we begin, here's a quick disclaimer. Disclaimer: the content on this channel is created for entertainment and discussion purposes only. I do not own any of the anime footage used in my videos. All rights and credits belong to their respective creators and copyright holders. With that said, let's begin the story. Naruko sprang to her feet so quickly that her legs wobbled for a moment. She took a steady breath and looked around, trying to understand where she was. The ground beneath her sandals was made of dark stone, warm to the touch. In the distance, glowing streams of red light wound through the rocky land like shining rivers. Above her, wide gray clouds drifted slowly across the sky, sprinkling soft flakes of ash that floated down like quiet snow. Naruko blinked in amazement. "I've never seen a place like this before," she murmured. She had traveled far and wide during her many adventures, exploring forests, mountains, and villages across the great land she knew. But this place was completely different. Tall mountains shaped like cones rose in the distance, gently glowing near their tops. "Those must be volcanoes," she said thoughtfully, remembering stories she had once heard from travelers. The air smelled strange, but not unpleasant, like warm earth after a long summer day. Naruko crouched down and picked up a small piece of black stone. It crumbled in her fingers like dry sand. When she tried to stand again, the loose rocks shifted under her foot, and she tumbled softly onto the ground with a surprised oof. She lay on her back for a moment, staring up at the pale sky. "Well," she said with a small laugh, "that didn't go exactly as planned." The sky above her looked calm and quiet, and as she rested there, her thoughts slowly drifted away like the clouds. And then, Naruko suddenly opened her eyes. She was no longer lying on warm black stone. Instead, she was sitting in a comfortable seat, surrounded by the quiet murmur of people talking softly. For a second she looked around in confusion. Then she remembered. She was on a night train. The train had been traveling from Tokyo to Kyoto, and the gentle squeal of the brakes as it slowed into the station must have woken her from her dream. Naruko stretched her arms above her head and smiled a little. "Dreams can be strange sometimes," she whispered. Outside the window, the station was lively and bright. People stepped on and off the train with busy energy, carrying bags and chatting with friends and family. Naruko watched them patiently from her seat. She didn't hurry like the others. She simply enjoyed the moment, watching the glowing station lights and listening to the distant sounds of the city. "Everyone moves so fast," she said softly to herself. "Sometimes it's nice to slow down." When most of the passengers had left the train, Naruko finally stood up. But instead of walking toward the exit, she gave a playful little snap of her fingers. The shadows near her feet shimmered quietly, like ripples in water. They curled upward for just a second. And then Naruko was gone. A moment later, a dark blur leapt gracefully across the rooftops of Kyoto. It was Naruko, moving as lightly as a breeze. Her long silver hair streamed behind her as she bounded from building to building with joyful ease. "Ah, that feels much better," she said with a bright grin. The train had been far too cramped for her liking. She much preferred traveling this way, with the wind brushing past her cheeks and the wide sky above. Kyoto stretched out beneath her like a sparkling maze of lights and rooftops. It was a beautiful city, one filled with hidden wonders. Many people didn't realize it, but Kyoto was home to all sorts of magical beings who lived peacefully alongside humans. Friendly spirits, playful creatures, and wise guardians wandered the city's quiet streets. Long ago, Naruko had helped create a special magical barrier around the city. The gentle spell kept everyone safe and helped the magical residents live quietly without causing confusion. Naruko had loved the city so much that she once stayed for many years, helping guide and protect it. But Naruko had always been someone who loved to explore. So after a long time, she had packed her things, left a cheerful note for her friends, and set off to see the rest of the world. Now, after many adventures, she had returned for a visit. As she leapt across a tall building, Naruko paused and glanced at her reflection in a glass window. Her golden eyes shone brightly in the city lights, and the whisker-like marks on her cheeks gave her a slightly mischievous look. She tilted her head and smiled. "Yep," she said happily. "Still me." With a light push, she jumped again, soaring through the cool night air. Below her, rooftop gardens glowed softly with lanterns. A group of children laughed as they played games under the stars. Some of them even had fluffy tails or small animal ears, and they pointed upward in wonder as Naruko's shadow zipped past. Naruko waved cheerfully as she flew by. Being back in Kyoto filled her heart with warmth. The city had changed over time, taller buildings, brighter lights, but its spirit was still the same. Kind, lively, and full of surprises. Naruko closed her eyes for a moment as she glided through the wind. This, she said with a peaceful sigh, is the best way to travel. And with another joyful leap, Naruko disappeared into the glowing night sky above Kyoto, ready for whatever new adventure tomorrow might bring. A few minutes later. Okay, I take back what I said. Skyscrapers are terrible. The silver-haired traveler complained softly as she stood sideways along the wall of a tall building, holding a folded paper map in both hands. Her name was Naruko, and she was trying very hard to figure out where she was. The city around her was enormous. Tall buildings reached up toward the clouds, and streets stretched in every direction. Naruko knew the place she was searching for should be somewhere nearby, but the city had changed so much over the years that she had become a little lost. Maybe I should have bought one of those GPS devices, Naruko muttered to herself while studying the map. Although I'm not sure it would work very well in a place like this. She looked around, hoping to recognize an old landmark that might have survived the years of construction and modernization. Now, if I were a grumpy old monkey, where would I live? Naruko wondered aloud. Anyone overhearing her might have thought it was a very strange question, but Naruko did not mind. She had known the monkey she was looking for a very long time. Somewhere with trees, probably, she continued thoughtfully. Naruko closed her eyes for a moment and focused quietly. She reached out with her senses, gently searching across the city. She was careful not to make too much of a disturbance. If she did, curious spirits and magical creatures might notice, and she would end up surrounded by friendly visitors asking questions and offering tea. Naruko smiled to herself at the thought. The magical folk she had met over the years were often very kind and welcoming. But business first, she said firmly, shaking her head. I should finish what I came here to do. With renewed determination, Naruko folded her map and set off again. Aha! There you are, you old monkey, she said a little while later. After traveling many city blocks and riding a train for quite some time, Naruko finally reached the edge of the city. There, the crowded streets gave way to a peaceful wooded area. Tall trees swayed gently in the breeze, and birds sang among the branches. Hidden within the trees was a small clearing. In the middle stood a simple wooden hut. This quiet place had been the home of the Oracle, an unusual and mysterious monkey spirit who had lived there for centuries. Many people spoke about the Oracle with great respect. Some believed he could sense danger before it happened. Others believed he could see glimpses of the future. Whatever the truth was, one thing was certain: the Oracle's advice was always wise. Naruko had received a special invitation from him, which was why she had come all this way. She walked through the trees toward the hut. Long ago, she had placed protective seals around the area to keep the place safe and hidden from the busy world outside. The seals were still working perfectly. The hut itself was quite simple. It had one story, a small garden, and a patch of farmland where the Oracle grew his food. Naruko took a deep breath and knocked gently on the door. She did not have to wait long. The door opened, and a cheerful voice called out. Naruko. You've come. It has been such a long time. Standing in the doorway was the Oracle himself. He was about 5 feet tall with broad shoulders and short legs covered in soft auburn fur. Most of his body was furry like a monkey's, though his face looked a bit more human. His bright green eyes sparkled with curiosity and wisdom. Despite his serious title, the Oracle had a very lively personality. Naruko looked him over with a small smile. Hello, Rin, she replied calmly. I see you're just as energetic as ever. The old monkey spirit laughed warmly. Ha ha ha. And you still say things exactly the same way you used to. Naruko noticed that his clothing had not changed much either. He wore a light kimono and wooden sandals, just as he always had. Seeing him again filled her with a quiet sense of nostalgia. Rin the Oracle stepped aside and gestured toward the inside of the hut. Come in, he said excitedly. I have something very interesting to tell you. I saw something in a vision, and I think you will find it quite wonderful. Naruko gave a small, curious sigh but followed him inside. She hoped the Oracle's message would be just as fascinating as he claimed. After all, When an ancient monkey spirit invited someone for a visit, it was usually for a very important reason. In the town of Kuo, 1 month later. Kuo Academy was the only private school in the town of Kuo. Long ago it had been a prestigious school for girls, but a few years earlier it had become a coeducational academy. Even after the change, it remained famous for its excellent grades, lively sports teams, and many clubs. Students from all over hoped to study there, because it was known as a place where bright and hard-working young people could learn and grow. Naruko-sama. A tired groan escaped Naruko as she heard the shout echo across the courtyard. She slowly lifted her head from where it had been resting on her folded arms atop her desk. Her bright blue eyes blinked sleepily as she looked toward the door of the classroom. Standing there were 3 boys she had come to know very well over the past month. Far too well, in her opinion. Naruko had only been attending Kuo Academy for a short time, but these 3 had already managed to become the most troublesome part of her school days. The boys hurried over to her desk with eager smiles. They were known around school as a rather odd trio who were always getting into silly situations. Many students simply called them the perverted trio, though Naruko herself preferred to think of them as the 3 very noisy boys. The group consisted of Matsuda, Motohama, and Issei. Matsuda was cheerful and energetic. He had once been very focused on sports, but these days he mostly spent his time chatting loudly with his friends. His classmates often teased him for his shiny bald head, though he never seemed bothered by it. Motohama wore glasses and enjoyed showing off how observant he believed he was. He liked to claim he could guess all sorts of details about people just by looking at them, though most of the time his guesses were wildly incorrect. The last member of the trio was Issei Hayato. He was the loudest of the 3 and often the most dramatic. He had a habit of making big declarations about becoming popular someday, which usually made the other students laugh. Naruko rested her chin in her hand and sighed. To be honest, she had met plenty of unusual people during her life, so the trio's strange behavior did not bother her as much as one might expect. In fact, sometimes she even found their antics a little funny. The real problem was something else entirely. Within 10 minutes of Naruko arriving at Kuo Academy for the first time, the 3 boys had loudly started calling her Naruko-sama and following her around everywhere. Before long, many students believed she must be their leader in some mysterious club. Naruko had tried to explain that she was not their leader. Unfortunately, the trio never seemed to listen. Naruko had arrived at Kuo Academy 1 month earlier as a third-year exchange student from England. Moving to the school had not been her idea at all. If it had been up to her, she would have happily spent her time exploring the world, reading books, and enjoying bowls of delicious ramen. But someone else had insisted she come. And that someone was a certain wise, and slightly mischievous, monkey. Flashback. You want me to do what? Naruko exclaimed, her eyes widening in surprise. Across the room, an elderly monkey oracle sat comfortably in a very fluffy pink armchair. The monkey looked quite pleased, as if the whole situation amused him greatly. Do I truly need to repeat myself, Naruko-sama? The oracle asked calmly. Yes, Naruko replied immediately, folding her arms. The monkey chuckled softly. As I said, you must go to Kuo Academy and enroll as a student, he explained. While you are there, you will meet 2 powerful devils and the groups that follow them. The future seems to gather around those groups, though the exact reason is unclear. Naruko tilted her head thoughtfully. Kuo will soon become a place where many important events occur, the monkey continued. If you wish to be part of what is coming, you should be there. Who knows? Perhaps the dream you have carried for so long may finally come true. Naruko stopped pacing and looked at the monkey carefully. Well, she admitted, you might have a point. Something interesting happening would definitely help with the boredom I've been feeling lately. The monkey smiled wisely. A sensible decision. Naruko scratched the back of her head. But do I really have to be a student? She asked. Couldn't I just be a teacher or something? The monkey shook his head. If you wish to understand what is coming, you must meet those groups naturally. Being a student will allow that to happen. Naruko sighed, though a small smile appeared on her face. All right, she said. I'll give this school thing another try. End of flashback. Back in the present, Naruko looked at the 3 boys standing eagerly in front of her desk. She sighed again, but this time she could not help smiling a little. Maybe attending Kuo Academy would turn out to be more interesting than she had expected. Naruko had not really wanted to transfer schools in the middle of the year. Still, sometimes life brought surprises, and she had learned long ago that surprises often turned into adventures. So she applied to Kuo Academy. 2 weeks after the school year had already started, Naruko walked through the gates carrying a small backpack and a hopeful smile. The school was famous for many things: beautiful gardens, tall buildings, and a student population that was mostly girls. Naruko thought it looked like a cheerful place to start fresh. Unfortunately, her very first lunch period did not go quite the way she imagined. Naruko had just stepped into the busy cafeteria when 3 very enthusiastic students rushed over to greet her. Around school they were jokingly known as the Curious Trio, because they loved mysteries and spent most of their free time researching strange facts. "Hi," Naruko said politely. "I'm Uzumaki Naruko. I just trans." Before she could finish, the 3 students gasped loudly. They jumped to their feet. "You're Naruko," one of them cried. "The Naruko," said another. "The writer of the Journey of Icha Icha adventure books," the third declared. Half the cafeteria turned to look. Naruko blinked in surprise. Years ago she had published a series of funny adventure stories under a pen name, Jiraiya the Wandering Sage. The books were silly tales about travelers exploring strange lands, getting into ridiculous trouble, and learning unexpected lessons. Naruko had never expected anyone to figure out who really wrote them. But the Curious Trio loved solving puzzles. Within a week of the newest book appearing in the library, they had somehow traced the mysterious author back to Naruko herself. Now they were bowing dramatically in the middle of the cafeteria as if they had just discovered a legendary hero. Naruko rubbed the back of her head and laughed awkwardly. It's just a few stories," she said. But rumors spread quickly in a school full of curious students. By the end of the day, almost everyone at Kuo Academy knew that the cheerful new transfer student secretly wrote a popular book series. It was not exactly the quiet start Naruko had hoped for. Still, Naruko had always been good at handling unexpected attention. She had a bright personality, endless energy, and the kind of smile that made people feel comfortable around her. Instead of worrying about the rumors, she simply stayed herself. She helped classmates with homework. She joined conversations. She listened to people's stories. And whenever things became a little too serious, she made everyone laugh. Little by little, the students of Kuo Academy realized something important. Naruko was not just the mysterious writer everyone talked about. She was also kind, cheerful, and wonderfully strange in the best possible way. But there was one thing Naruko loved most about her new school: pranks. Back when she was younger, Naruko had been famous for playful mischief. She loved harmless tricks that made people laugh and turned ordinary days into exciting ones. Over time she had grown busy with many responsibilities, and her prankster spirit had been resting quietly. Kuo Academy changed that. The wide hallways, the peaceful courtyards, the tall staircases, every corner of the school seemed perfect for creative jokes. Of course, Naruko made sure every prank was completely harmless. Sometimes a classroom door would open to reveal a shower of colorful paper stars. Other times a teacher might discover that the chalkboard had been decorated overnight with cheerful drawings and encouraging messages. No one ever got hurt. But everyone got surprised. Soon the students began whispering about the mysterious school spirit prankster. Most people had a strong suspicion it was Naruko, but she always smiled innocently whenever someone asked. Aside from her playful tricks, Naruko settled into school life quite well. Her grades were excellent, mostly because she loved learning about new things. History, science, literature, Naruko enjoyed it all. Her memory was sharp, and her curiosity seemed endless. She also made friends quickly. Some people thought Naruko had a wild, adventurous look about her, like someone who had traveled many roads and seen many places. Whether that was true or not, everyone agreed that spending time with her was always interesting. Conversations with Naruko were never boring. One day she might tell a funny story. Another day she might offer thoughtful advice. And sometimes she would simply listen while someone else shared their worries. Before long, Naruko realized something wonderful. Kuo Academy had become more than just a new school. It had become her playground for creativity, laughter, and friendship, a place where every day held the promise of another small adventure. And if a few harmless pranks happened along the way, well, that just made the adventure even better. At first, Naruko wasn't quite sure what to think about the strange situation she had found herself in. The mysterious oracle who had guided her here had placed her in a large academy filled with bright classrooms, curious students, and endless clubs to explore. Every day felt like the beginning of a new adventure. Naruko, with her spiky golden hair and cheerful grin, decided that if she was going to be here, she might as well make the most of it. One of her favorite hobbies was writing stories. Naruko loved imagining exciting worlds and funny characters, so she spent many afternoons scribbling in a thick notebook she carried everywhere. Her classmates had somehow discovered that she was the secret author of a very popular series of adventure books. Soon, curious readers from around the school began asking her questions about her stories. Will there be another book? Can I be a character in the next one? Where do you get all your ideas? Naruko always laughed and rubbed the back of her head when they asked. Hey, one question at a time, she would say. Some students even volunteered to help inspire her stories by sharing their own funny experiences or imaginative ideas. Naruko thought that was wonderful. After all, stories were better when everyone's creativity joined together. Still, there were 3 boys at school who took their admiration a little too far. Naruko secretly called them the overly excited trio. They followed her around the hallways, asked for writing advice, and treated her like she was the greatest author in the world. While Naruko appreciated their enthusiasm, it could sometimes be a little overwhelming. One afternoon, as Naruko sat on a bench outside the school courtyard thinking about her next story, one of the trio came running toward her. "Naruko-sama," Matsuda shouted, waving his arms as he hurried over. Naruko looked up with a calm but slightly tired smile. "What is it this time?" she asked. "If it's about the next book, I already sent the manuscript to the publisher." "And no. It's not that," Matsuda said quickly, trying to catch his breath. "Issei told me that Kiba is looking for you. Apparently the student council president, Rias, wants you to come to the occult research club for a meeting." Naruko blinked in surprise. "The occult research club?" she repeated. She had heard whispers about that club. The members were known for studying strange mysteries, ancient legends, and unusual happenings around the academy. Naruko slowly stood up, her eyes shining with curiosity. "Well," she said with a bright grin, "that actually sounds pretty interesting." She tucked her notebook under her arm and stretched her arms toward the sky. "Maybe this school has more adventures waiting for me than I thought." With that, Naruko began walking toward the old club building at the edge of campus, her mind already buzzing with new story ideas. After all, every great story begins with a mysterious invitation. "I'm surprised you haven't spoken to her yet," said a girl with short black hair and thoughtful violet eyes. She adjusted the round red glasses resting neatly on her nose as she looked across the desk in the student council office. Her name was Sona Shitori, the president of the student council at Kuo Academy. Sona was known for being organized, calm, and very responsible. She stood about average height and always wore her school uniform perfectly, as if every detail had been carefully planned. Her serious expression often made people think of a quiet librarian who loved order and knowledge. Standing just behind her was her closest partner, Tsubaki. Tsubaki had long black hair that flowed almost to her knees and wore neat blue glasses. She was dependable and observant, and she supported Sona in everything the student council did. Together, they worked hard to keep the academy running smoothly. Across from them sat 2 other students. One of them was Akeno Himejima, a graceful girl with a gentle smile. Her long dark hair was tied in a high ponytail with an orange ribbon, and she had a calm and friendly way of speaking that made other students feel comfortable. Many people admired Akeno because she was kind, helpful, and always willing to lend a hand. Next to her sat Rias, who was quietly finishing her lunch. Rias had long crimson hair and bright, thoughtful eyes. She was known around the academy as a confident and capable leader, but at the moment she seemed deep in thought. Sona folded her hands on the desk. "I'm referring to the new student," she said calmly. "Naruko." At the name, Akeno tilted her head with curiosity. "You mean the energetic girl who transferred here recently?" she asked. Sona nodded once. "That's right. From what I've heard, Naruko has already made quite an impression around the school. She's cheerful, determined, and seems to make friends wherever she goes. I thought you might have already invited her to join your club." Rias finally looked up, a small smile appearing on her face. "I've been observing her," she admitted. "Naruko is unique." She reached for a small folder on the table and opened it. Inside were a few notes written neatly on paper. "Her full name is Uzumaki Naruko," Rias continued. "She's 17 and recently enrolled at Kuo Academy. Her grades are average, but her teachers say she works very hard and never gives up when something is difficult." Akeno leaned forward with interest. "That sounds admirable," she said warmly. "It is," Rias agreed. "But what stands out the most is her spirit. She encourages others when they feel discouraged, and she approaches every challenge with excitement. Even when she makes mistakes, she laughs and tries again." Sona listened quietly, considering this. So you think she would be a good addition to your group? Rias closed the folder gently. I do, she said. But more importantly, I think Kuo Academy could become a very special place for her. Naruko has a bright energy that lifts people's spirits. I want to make sure she feels welcome here. Tsubaki smiled slightly, which was rare for her. A student who spreads encouragement is always valuable, she said. Sona adjusted her glasses again and gave a small nod. Very well, she replied. Then I look forward to seeing what kind of adventures Naruko will bring to our academy. Outside the window, the afternoon sun shone over the school grounds. Somewhere in the distance, the cheerful voice of a girl could be heard laughing with new friends. Naruko's story at Kuo Academy was only just beginning. Rias finished reading the report and gently placed the papers on the table. She looked across the room at Sona, who was listening carefully. While athletically she is about average for a student who is not part of a sports club, she has no history of serious injury or illness, Rias explained. She is well known around Kuo Academy because she often gets involved in silly adventures with her friends. They are always trying to solve little mysteries around the school or explore places they are not supposed to go. Sona smiled slightly. That sounds like a lively group of students. Rias nodded. Yes. Most teachers simply consider her an energetic but harmless student. For a long time, we thought Naruko was nothing more than that. She paused before continuing. That changed a few months ago. Quite by accident, we discovered that she carries a very unusual power. Her magical presence is so gentle and quiet that it almost disappears, which is why we did not notice it sooner. It was only when Akeno happened to meet her near the Kendo Club practice area that we sensed something special. Akeno gave a cheerful nod. At first I thought it was my imagination. But when I focused carefully, I realized Naruko had a hidden magical energy. That was enough to make me curious, Rias continued. However, I did not want to jump to conclusions. I wanted to understand her ability first. The problem is that her magical energy is very calm and difficult to read, almost like a quiet stream hidden under leaves. Rias sighed softly and rubbed her forehead. It is truly puzzling, she said. Her magic is gentle, yet there is something bright about it, like sunlight. Sona leaned forward with interest. So what made you decide to look into her more closely now? Rias smiled. Her scent. Sona blinked in confusion. Her scent? Yes, Rias said. Koneko noticed it first. She said Naruko carries the scent of something ancient and noble. Akeno clasped her hands together. It reminded Koneko of the spirit of a great dragon, the kind you might hear about in old legends. Sona looked thoughtful. That is quite remarkable, she said. So Naruko may have a connection to something legendary. Exactly, Rias replied. And if that is true, she may have wonderful potential. Sona rested her chin on her hand. Then why not simply talk to her? That is exactly what I plan to do, Rias said warmly. Naruko seems kind and friendly. I believe the best way to understand her is to invite her for a conversation. Sona nodded approvingly. That sounds much better than making guesses. Rias gathered her papers again, but Sona raised another question. What about the other new student you mentioned earlier? Uzumaki Naruko. Rias's expression brightened immediately. Oh, she is quite interesting, she said. Naruko transferred here about a month ago from a private school in Britain. She is 18 years old, has soft silver hair and bright golden eyes. Many students say she looks unusual, almost like she stepped out of a storybook. Sona chuckled. That certainly sounds memorable. She is friendly and cheerful, Rias continued. Many students like her because she helps people and always has encouraging words for others. She studies well, exercises often, and says she enjoys learning different martial arts as a hobby. And her magic? Sona asked. Her magical energy is stronger than most ordinary supernaturals, Rias replied. Not overwhelming, but very steady. It feels warm and determined, almost like a glowing lantern. Sona thought quietly for a moment. She sounds like someone with great potential, she said. I agree, Rias replied. But more importantly, she seems like someone with a kind heart. That is the most important quality of all. Sona smiled. So what will you do next? I have asked Kiba to deliver an invitation, Rias explained. I would like Naruko to visit the old schoolhouse after class. I simply want to meet her properly and learn more about her. That sounds reasonable, Sona said. I will not interfere. It seems you have enough to think about already. Rias gave her friend a grateful smile. Thank you, Sona. She stood and walked toward the door, Akeno following behind her. Until next time, Rias said. After they left, Sona leaned back in her chair and folded her arms thoughtfully. I wonder what kind of story Naruko carries with her, she murmured. Tsubaki, who had been standing quietly nearby, looked up. Would you like me to gather more information about her, Keiku? Sona nodded. Yes, please. I have a feeling Naruko may become someone very important at Kuo Academy. And somewhere on campus, the cheerful girl with silver hair and golden eyes was walking through the courtyard, greeting friends with a bright smile, completely unaware that many wonderful adventures were waiting just ahead. Sometime later. Uzumaki-san, I have been looking for you for a while now. Buku has asked me to invite you to a meeting with her at the Occult Research Club. Yes, Kiba-san. I have already been informed of Gremory's wish to see me. Since you're here, you might as well lead the way, Naruko replied with a friendly smile as she glanced at the boy who had just spoken. Kiba Yuto was a blonde-haired teenage boy with a pair of distinct steel-gray eyes. He was quite tall for his age, only an inch or so shorter than Naruko herself, with a slim but athletic build. Naruko quickly noticed the calm and careful way he carried himself. He walked with excellent balance, never stumbling or rushing, and his posture suggested someone who practiced with great discipline. Naruko had spent many years meeting all kinds of people, and she had become very good at noticing little details about them. It was almost like reading a book just by looking at the cover. Kiba seemed like someone dependable and hardworking, the kind of person who took pride in improving his skills. Kiba nodded and began walking toward the path that led away from the main school building. Sorry about the long walk, he said over his shoulder. Buku really likes the old school building. When we first came to Kuo, she thought it had a charming atmosphere, so she insisted that our club room be located there. Don't worry about it, Naruko replied cheerfully. It's actually nice to stretch my legs. I'd almost forgotten how much sitting is involved in a regular school day. So you haven't been in school for a while? Kiba asked. He was walking slightly ahead of Naruko as he guided the way, turning his head back to speak with her. That's true, Naruko said with a small shrug. The school I attended before was a boarding school in England, and things were organized very differently there. I also left earlier than expected because of my move to Japan, so my time there felt a bit scattered. I see, Kiba said, nodding thoughtfully before changing the subject. Well, we're almost there. Once we pass this area, the old school building will come into view. Naruko looked ahead with curiosity. Soon, the building appeared between the trees, and she studied it carefully. It was not at all what she had imagined. The old school building was beautiful. It was a large wooden structure with a slightly Western style to its design. 2 floors rose above the ground, and a small clock tower stood proudly above the entrance. Wide windows lined the walls, allowing sunlight to pour inside, and the freshly painted exterior gave the building a welcoming appearance. For something called the old school building, it was very well cared for. Naruko found herself quietly amused. When she had first heard that the Occult Research Club met in an abandoned building, she had pictured something quite different, perhaps a creaky old place covered in dust and cobwebs. Instead, this building felt peaceful and elegant, almost like a quiet library. Well, Naruko thought with a small grin, it certainly has character. As they continued walking, they passed a group of students nearby who seemed to be discussing their after-school club activities. Some were carrying sports equipment, while others held books and notebooks. The lively chatter filled the afternoon air. Naruko waved politely as they passed. A few of the students waved back, surprised but happy to see the new transfer student greeting them so warmly. Looks like everyone is busy today, Naruko said. After-school clubs are very popular here, Kiba explained. Many students stay late to practice or study together. That sounds fun, Naruko replied. I like places where people work hard together. After a few more steps, they reached the front of the old school building. Standing close to it now made it seem even larger. The wooden doors were tall and polished, and the windows reflected the bright sky above. Kiba stopped and turned toward her. This is it, he said. The Occult Research Club meets inside. Naruko placed her hands behind her head in a relaxed way and smiled. Well then, she said brightly, let's go meet this Buku of yours. With that, the 2 students stepped forward toward the entrance of the old school building, where new conversations and unexpected friendships were waiting to begin. As Naruko Uzumaki stepped into the old school building, her footsteps echoed softly along the wooden hallway. The place felt quiet and mysterious, like a forgotten corner of the academy that very few students visited. Kiba walked a few steps ahead of her with confidence until he stopped in front of a tall wooden door. He knocked politely and raised his voice. "Buku, I'm back. I brought Uzumaki-san to meet with you." After announcing their arrival, Kiba gave Naruko a quick nod and slipped away down the hall, leaving her standing in front of the door. Curious, Naruko gently pushed it open and stepped inside. The room she entered looked unlike any classroom she had ever seen. The walls were covered with dark wooden panels, and the lighting was soft and warm. Several candles rested on small stands around the room, giving everything a calm golden glow. On the left side were comfortable sofas and elegant chairs that looked as though they belonged in an old storybook mansion. On the right side, the floor was clear except for a large circle carved carefully into the wood. It looked like a piece of art, filled with swirling patterns and symbols. Naruko tilted her head, studying the design with interest. "This club sure has a unique style," she murmured to herself. Just then, she heard the gentle sound of running water somewhere in the room. Looking around, she noticed a thin white curtain hanging near one corner. Behind it, water could still be heard splashing softly. Naruko blinked in surprise. "Oh. Someone must be finishing up," she said, quickly looking away to give them privacy. A slightly startled voice came from behind the curtain. "Ah, one moment please. I didn't realize our guest had already arrived." Naruko scratched the back of her head with an awkward but friendly smile. "No rush. I can wait." While she waited, another door opened quietly. A tall girl walked into the room carrying a tray with a teapot and several cups. She had long dark hair tied in a ponytail with an orange ribbon, and her bright violet eyes sparkled with a cheerful warmth. "Welcome," the girl said kindly. "You must be Naruko Uzumaki." Naruko straightened and gave a polite nod. "That's me. I'm Akeno Himejima," the girl replied with a gentle smile. "Would you like some tea while you wait?" "That sounds great, thank you," Naruko said happily. Akeno set the tray down on a small table beside the sofas and poured a cup of tea. The warm, pleasant smell filled the room. Naruko sat down carefully, holding the cup with both hands. "This place is really interesting," she said. "Is this the Occult Research Club?" Akeno nodded. "Yes, it is." A moment later, the curtain rustled softly and another girl entered the room. She had long crimson hair that flowed neatly over her shoulders and wore the Kuo Academy uniform with graceful confidence. She walked forward with a welcoming smile. "Thank you for waiting," she said. "My name is Rias. I'm the president of this club." Naruko stood up politely. "Nice to meet you. I'm Naruko Uzumaki. I just transferred here recently." Rias gestured for her to sit again while Akeno poured another cup of tea and stood beside the chair like a helpful assistant. "We're very happy you came," Rias said. "There was something important we wanted to discuss with you." Naruko leaned forward slightly, curious. "Something important?" Rias nodded thoughtfully. "Yes. You see, Naruko. We've noticed that you might be a little different from most students here." Naruko blinked. "Different how?" Rias studied her carefully for a moment before speaking again. "Let me ask you a question first," she said gently. "What exactly are you?" Naruko tilted her head in confusion. "Well, I'm Naruko. I just moved here from England, I live in an apartment nearby, and I attend Kuo Academy." Akeno covered a small laugh behind her hand. Rias smiled patiently. "I meant something else," she clarified. "Not who you are, but what you are." Naruko thought about it for a moment. Then a playful grin appeared on her face. "Well," she said with a light shrug, "I'm a student, I like ramen, and I try my best to make new friends wherever I go." Akeno giggled again, clearly amused. Rias folded her hands calmly. "Naruko," she said kindly, "we know the world is bigger than it seems. There are many unusual beings out there. And we believe you may be one of them." Naruko studied their expressions for a moment. They both looked serious, but also friendly. Finally, she relaxed back into the sofa. "Well," she admitted with a small smile, "you're not wrong." Rias's eyes brightened with curiosity. "So you do know what we're talking about?" Naruko nodded. "I do." "And what are you?" Rias asked. Naruko lifted her teacup, taking a calm sip before answering. "If we're using the right word for it," she said thoughtfully, "you could probably call me a yokai." The room grew quiet for a moment as Rias and Akeno exchanged interested looks. Then Rias smiled warmly. "I see," she said. "That explains quite a lot." Naruko set her cup down and grinned. "So," she asked cheerfully, now that you know my secret. What happens next? Rias folded her hands neatly on the table and took a small breath, as if preparing to tell an important story. It may sound unusual, she began gently, but before I ask you anything, I should explain a bit of history about devils. Naruko listened quietly from the sofa. She leaned forward slightly, curious. Long ago, Rias continued, there were 3 great groups who lived in different parts of the world, the devils, the fallen angels, and the angels. Sometimes people call them the 3 factions. Each group had its own home and its own way of living. She spoke calmly, like a teacher telling a story to a class. Devils usually live in a place called the underworld. Fallen angels were once angels who chose to follow a different path, and they settled there as well. Angels themselves continued to live in the heavenly realms and devoted themselves to helping keep balance in the world. Rias paused for a moment and then continued. A very long time ago, the 3 groups had many disagreements about how the world should be guided. These disagreements grew so large that they became known as the Great War. For many years the factions argued and competed with each other. Eventually, however, everyone realized that continuing the conflict would only cause more problems for all sides. She smiled softly. So they agreed to stop and form a careful peace. Since then, the 3 factions have tried to maintain balance and avoid further trouble. While explaining all this, Rias opened a small wooden box and placed a chessboard on the table. Inside were several glowing crimson pieces that shimmered faintly. Naruko tilted her head. A chess set? In a way, Rias replied. But this one has a special purpose. She began placing the pieces on the board. After the Great War, many devils had disappeared or moved on to different paths. Because of that, our numbers became smaller. To help welcome new members into our society, devils created something called the Evil Piece System. Naruko watched closely as the pieces glowed with a soft red light. These pieces allow a high-class devil to invite someone from another world or species to become a devil and join their household, Rias explained. The group that forms around that devil is called a peerage. Each person becomes represented by one of the chess pieces. She pointed to the board. There are 8 pawns, 2 bishops, 2 knights, 2 rooks, and 1 queen. The leader represents the king. In this case, I am the king. Rias tapped a few pieces gently. Akeno serves as my queen. Koneko Tojo is my rook. Kiba Yuto is my knight. My bishop is currently resting and unable to help for the time being. Naruko crossed her arms thoughtfully. So, you want me to join your peerage? She asked. Rias nodded. Yes. If you accept, you would learn magic, discover new abilities, and grow stronger over time. And most importantly, she added warmly, you would have a place to belong. A family that stands beside you. A quiet stillness filled the room. Akeno and Rias both looked toward Naruko, waiting for her answer. Naruko slowly stood up from the sofa. Her expression was calm, though her bright eyes sparkled with confidence. Well, she said, stretching her arms a little, that sounds pretty amazing. Rias smiled hopefully. But, Naruko added playfully, there's just one tiny thing you should know about me first. At that moment, a soft silver light shimmered behind her. With a gentle rustling sound, a pair of large metallic silver wings unfolded from Naruko's back. They looked strong and beautiful, catching the light like polished moonlight. The room grew silent with surprise. Naruko scratched the back of her head and grinned. See, she said cheerfully, I might already be a little more unusual than you expected. Dear YouTube family. That's all for now, but the adventure doesn't stop here. More exciting content is on the way. If you enjoyed the video, please like, share, and subscribe to the channel to stay connected and support the journey. Thank you for watching. Regards. Anime Octopus.